everybody, and welcome to a very special episode of the Cables to Clouds I almost said fortnightly news, but I guess the monthly news update. I, of course, am Tim. Everybody knows me already. And Chris is off in Japan doing, Japanese things probably. So Chris and I decided we were going to bring in a good friend of ours who is a co-author of the AWS ANS book and a longtime friend of both of ours and of the show. If you go back far enough, he's been on the show. Steve, I guess it's been like a while. We've needed to get you back here earlier. But yeah, Steve, go ahead and he's doing the news with me. Go ahead and introduce yourself real quick so we can get going.
Greetings, programs. So, yep, I am friends with Chris and Tim all the way back from when we were studying for our CCIEs, which we all got, by the way.
Yep.
And I am a security solutions engineer for Cisco. So I've been at Cisco for like a little over 6 years. So Tim and I are both at Cisco now. And
yes, that's right.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yep. Sounds good. Like I said, Steve is also the third co-author on our AWS Advanced Networking certification book, which we all, did blood, sweat, and tears to bring out earlier. Was it earlier this year or last year? I don't remember. It's been so long now. All right. So let's just jump right into the news, right? And top story, no surprise to anyone, is the recent AWS outage for US East 1. So US East 1, as everyone who works with AWS knows, is pretty much the nerve center and also the Achilles heel of AWS. And this is no exception, although the root cause this time is rather interesting. So I've included some links in as always, in our news update. The one I'm going to be referring to right now is actually the AWS after action report or summary or whatever. It's very dense read. It's really complicated and confusing. But basically, you have AWS relying on AWS services to make AWS work. And that's the kind of the root of the problem. So they had an issue with DynamoDB, which is actually, and I didn't know this, I guess it makes sense, but the DynamoDB is actually what AWS uses to register and kind of record the DNS records that it hands out when things like load balancers are created. So, and there's a service that goes into place that creates the plan for the for these load balancers and the DNS records for them to be deployed. But apparently, as part of this outage, or one of the root causes of this outage was that the service that writes it to
Can I say the thing?
Go say the thing.
It was DNS.
It was DNS. We need the haiku. There's no way it was DNS. It couldn't be DNS. It was DNS. Yes, absolutely. So long story short, yes, DynamoDB is how AWS records DNS entries or how it hands out DNS for things like load balancer and services. And it crapped because of this race condition where it couldn't deploy the services faster than they were being created, and it just kind of collapsed on itself. So read through the very dense after action report here from AWS, but it's very interesting that AWS was using an AWS service to deploy AWS. It makes sense, like eat your own dog food, but when you get into this kind of race condition, it's you're asking yourself, scratching your head, wondering why you relied on a service that essentially relies on other services that then rely on your service working. I don't know, Steve, you read this too. We were both kind of scratching our heads at how this race condition ever got started. What do you think?
I think that, I guess, the obvious question, I guess, to me, the obvious, it's interesting when you kind of read through there. They make one little point in there, which is customers that were using DynamoDB in other regions that weren't just depending on US East 1 for DynamoDB wouldn't have been experiencing the same problems. But then again, but if you keep reading, the third phase of this whole thing, EC2 instances wouldn't start because of this. Yeah. Because again, EC2 was depending on DynamoDB, which had an empty DNS record in US East 1 because the plan updater and the plan enactors started racing each other. So they were kind of trying to talk their way out of saying that it was really, that if you'd architected things correctly, you wouldn't have had an issue, but you really would. Yeah. And so that's the fascinating thing to me, because usually when this happens and services start going down, everybody starts cackling and saying, well, architect your stuff correctly and you won't, won't happen. But in this case, I'm not so sure that's true. I think you could say, this wasn't the customer's fault, right?
No, it's absolutely true, man. And I don't know, I mean, you're on LinkedIn too, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners are as well. How many of those, you said you didn't architect your app correctly and that's why you're down and that's why you had this outage and you should have architected your app correctly. A lot of those people pontificating about that didn't understand like what was actually broken, right? Yeah. Like it's very hard to architect an application around this kind of failure, because this failure is like the platform failure, right? You've built your application on a platform. It doesn't matter how well you've architected if the platform itself is the Achilles heel that goes down. So, now would multi-cloud have helped you? Obviously, right? But then not everybody wants to own and deploy and pay for a multi-cloud network. So there's definitely trade-offs here, right? So for people that were down, they're probably right now looking at, what was the cost? How much money did I lose by being down for, the 2 hours or 4 hours or however long it was with the, depending on what the service that they were using is down. What was the cost of that versus what is the cost of, paying for a multi-cloud application, like a multi-cloud network, a multi-cloud because you essentially have to deploy your application twice, one in each cloud, or as like a disaster recovery type of, or disaster avoidance, I guess, method here. So I'd like to see some of those numbers. I'd love to see if people are doing that math and figuring it out. And I would love somebody to share and say, hey, we did the math. And, even being down for 4 hours, we still, the business risk that we kind of allowed or took on by not paying that extra money, maybe the numbers still worked out. Maybe they didn't. I'm really curious.
Well, the other thought I have about that is let's say your architect around the idea that one of your cloud service providers is going to fail, the complexity of that architecture itself can be a source of outages, right?
Yep, that's right.
I mean,
very good point.
It makes me think back to like way back in time when I had like a lot more hair, and like the Catalyst 6509s were brand new. That's how old I am. I remember when they first came out, and everyone was all excited about them. And I designed it. Like one of the first networks I ever designed, where someone would actually let me spend their money to build a network for them. I had a pair of Cat 6509s sitting on a raised floor in a data center, and we had a campus with like IDF closets all over the place, and all the IDFs came back into the 6509, and I had this very elaborate design where I thought of like every different way things could fail, fiber cuts and switches going down and link flapping. Like I thought through all the failure modes, designed all of them away, and it was beautiful on day one, but there was just one problem. If it was 2:30 in the morning and something didn't work, they had to call me every single time because nobody could understand it.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case.
Like you maybe could translate that issue into something like this, where you have some really smart person designing an app that will run across multiple cloud providers, but what happens when something goes wrong at 2:30 in the morning?
No, that's absolutely the case. I mean, I just did this thing I just spoke at the Megaport Connect event, and it was about how to design global WANs across clouds and data centers. And I had this big, beautiful slide that was talking about how you need to design networks that someone else can operate. Like if you take nothing else away, build a network that someone else can operate. Because that's the alternative, is that you're going to gold plate, you're going to build the Rube Goldberg network, and you're actually going to increase your downtime, because when it fails, it won't fail fast. It'll be in this kind of half working, half broken, you have to investigate it type of situation where you'll be down longer than if you had just failed fast and knew exactly what was wrong and how to fix it, right? So totally agree. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. I think you got this one, right, Chris? Steve. Steve.
Yeah. So this is like totally not really cloud related, but I thought it was really interesting, which is the the thing that sends out the patches to patch all the security vulns on your Windows devices, in and of itself had a critical vulnerability. So I'm talking about Windows Software Update Services. Had Microsoft disclosed a critical vulnerability, which is a remote unauthenticated attacker could execute arbitrary code against a WSUS server. So that's basically as bad as it gets, when somebody can just fire packets at your box and get it to run code that you want it to run. So if you run WSUS in your shop, I advise you to either turn it off or patch it like literally right now.
Can I use WSUS to patch my WSUS server?
You can, but patch you got to patch all the WSUS. Right, you got to patch the first one and then roll out the patch to the rest of them.
Oh my gosh.
So that's
remote unauthenticated attacker, man. That really is the worst of the options. Yeah.
And when a remote unauthenticated attacker can execute arbitrary code on your bot, it gets no worse.
Yeah, that's everything. That's like, it's like saying it's like a mall kiosk and then you're just logged in and anybody can walk by and do anything basically. So brilliant. Yeah, WSUS. We used to use that at my old enterprise. It's a good product, I guess, or whatever. But yeah, I mean, oof. So but you said they've released the patch, so I guess everybody should be going and stopping listening to this, and then going and running and patching their WSUS servers. And then you can come back. We'll be here at the end.
That's a good idea.
Speaking of vulnerabilities, not so much vulnerabilities. This one's a good one. Another article that was in the news recently was that F5 actually had attackers break in and steal source code. So source code for F5 devices. And normally you'd be like, okay, so what are they going to do? Are they going to start up a competing company or something? But the source code, of course, includes things like undisclosed vulnerabilities, or, I mean, you could just comb through source code to find vulnerabilities. So it's not that, hey, I stole your source code and now I'm going to start a competing, company and release your product or something. It's more like, hey, somebody stole the source code and now they can see literally everything that F5 is doing. And that includes the ability to create cyber attacks exploiting or against that code, right? So that's the real concern. So yeah, this was quote unquote blamed on Chinese spies. I'm kind of curious to see if they even know what group. I don't think they even know what group it was.
Yeah, that's what's interesting is they say I've seen multiple reports saying it was Chinese hackers, but it doesn't say, like, you'll see things like state sponsored, which means it's like a group that's like they're not Chinese government employees. They're just a hacking crew that gets checks from China, right?
Yep.
Like they're like a business, right? They're sponsored sponsored by China, which means they get their, China sends them checks to say, yeah, good job, do the thing, share your exploits with us. An example of that would actually be affecting Cisco would be the Arcane Door campaign, which there is attribution, but that is a Chinese sponsored group. So
interesting.
And then there was the big, the Microsoft. Several successful Microsoft campaigns are also Chinese sponsored hacking groups. So there's a theme emerging there. Just saying. Anyhow, we don't know. They say it's Chinese, but they're not attributing it to a specific group or crew, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. Because normally it's like, oh, well, here's Salt Typhoon or Scattered Spider or like one of the. They can attribute the attack to a certain group usually. So this is interesting. Yeah. Of course, F5 stock took a tumble. I don't know where it is now. This story is 7 days, 1 week old. This is a 1 week old story. So I'm curious to see if F5 stock is still down or not. Or, these things tend to be like once it leaves the news cycle, like maybe things change, things come back. This one's scary because, like I said, it's, and there's patches. By the way, F5 has released the, patches for this, it's kind of weird because it's like they released a patch, but it's not really patch. I guess it's a patch for the vulnerability that allows the hackers to get in the first place. But like at the end of the day, the source code has been stolen, so they haven't actually figured, so this is like a future thing, right? So we'll see future cyber attacks probably against F5 So it's a little different than like SolarWinds where you had a supply chain attack or something like that. It's a different thing.
Yep.
Right.
I would agree with that because I mean that now that they have the source code, I mean you can expect uncomfortable disclosures to start emanating from F5 now. They're definitely not in a good place.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Speaking of Steve.
So I was I was looking at the F5 story. One of the there's always a list of questions you ask as a security nerd when you see something like this, and we actually talked about it with the WSUS thing, which is how hard is it to do something, right? Do you have to be local or remote? Do you have to be authenticated? Can you be unauthenticated? Can you execute code? Is it arbitrary code, or is it just a privilege escalation, right? Mm-hmm. So how hard is it to do? What conditions have to be present for you to be able to exploit the vulnerability? And then how easy is it to get your hands on the code? Is it something where you can just go grab a proof of concept code off of GitHub, like any, or even worse, it's like packaged into like a Metasploit module, and anybody with can go watch a Udemy video and run it, the exploit, right? So kind of trying to get a sense of that while I was doing that, because that's just naturally what you're trying to learn. And with the F5, by the way, since it's a nation state actor, they're not going to be releasing their source code. This is not something that is going to be like a widely available where you're going to see exploits in the wild. This is something where whoever developed this code, if the Chinese government's paying for it, then there's a very limited number of folks that are actually going to be using this code. And if you're not one of their targets, you probably have nothing to worry about. So anyway, So I was going through that, and what I found was this interesting article and it's paywall, so they give you a couple paragraphs for a teaser from this site called The Stack. And apparently after the F5 disclosure, F5 released a threat hunting report. Shortly after that, it was a 33-page threat hunting report that talked about the same group that breached them has developed some malware that attacks vCenter servers and ESXi hypervisors, and it does it through something called vSock sockets. So what are vSock sockets? So it turns out vSock is like an API that actually allows you to interact with guest virtual machines on a hypervisor. And that's all of them, right? That's Azure.
Oh, wow.
I mean, that's Hyper-V. That's QEMU, right? Which means like Red Hat and the open source virtualization, as well as VMware, right? So this is like an API that's broadly used, and it actually allows you to communicate with guest VMs, which means you can open a communication channel, which means you can exfiltrate data and things like that.
Yeah, you can take data.
Yeah, so this group came up with with a tool that allowed them to implant malware, exfiltrate data, like all kinds of nasty stuff. And because I was trying to find like a second source, right? Because you got this one site that's reporting this. I'm like, there's got to be more sites. I'll go to the Google machine and ask it. And I couldn't find any, but I found lots of information about vSock, and more importantly, it turns out there's a number of recent CVEs for vSock, including 2 of them that are with less than 6 months old that target VMware, and they're not easy to develop for, but there's exploit code available, and it is actively. These vSock vulnerabilities in VMware are actually being actively exploited in the wild. So it's not just these guys, these Chinese nation state guys that created this malware, but these vulnerabilities are actually being widely exploited. And so I thought, wow, this is pretty interesting. I didn't realize that vSock was being so heavily exploited, and I have to not even really know that much about vSock until I came across it. I thought that was really interesting. And what that tells me is, if I'm a VMware shop, I'm going to be doing like some pretty strong segmentation on my management plane, like the management interface on those hosts and stuff. I'm going to have that stuff on lock. I'm going to have it so that you can't get to it unless you're like on a jump box or something like that. And I'm going to have some other controls in there too. Yeah,
because I mean, if they can get to it, if they can get to the host, then they can get to all the guests, is what I'm hearing, right? So
that's right. Yeah. It allows you to communicate directly with the guest, right?
Yep. Oof, which of course was all the data. That's like all the data you would want to pull out, or all the backdoors you'd want to place are right there on those guests.
And just the idea that you could actually implant malware that way. I mean, that's
crazy.
That's wild, right?
It's like out of band malware. Like you could just put it right on the box. Holy crap! Because normally, you got to have somebody go and grab the malware like via phishing link or something like this to pull it down. And here you can literally like just put it on the box. That's crazy.
From what I've read, I mean, this kind of vulnerability has a potential to be like wormable, right? Like once it gets started, it can start to spread on its own. But I haven't come across any cited examples of that, just only that there's a potential for that. But it is being exploited in the wild right now. So
those CVEs for vSock, I mean, do they have workarounds? Is there patches and stuff?
Yes.
Like how concerned
so
should everybody be?
And again, so CISA's been all over that and telling people to patch their VMware hosts.
Okay. Okay, cool. Just making sure. I don't want to freak everybody out and then not give them any path to do anything about it.
Yeah,
right?
You can patch for that, and on QEMU platforms you can just disable vSock as well. So that's another option.
Oh well, there you go. For the people that are running QEMU, like people who run
Proxmox,
people who
such as myself.
Hang on one second. Something just happened. Oh my god. Hold on one sec, guys. Chris will have to cut this part. Hang on one sec.
Okay.
All right, sorry, Chris. So I went to fix my earbud and it like apparently unpaused a video I didn't even know I had like paused. And then so it started playing in my ear while I was talking to you. All right, so Chris, we'll have to cut that little bit out. But okay, so let's go ahead and pick up. Also, your video quality just started to suck, but it's locally good. It records locally, so don't worry, you're good. Yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'll get started again in 3, 2. Wow, that's crazy. All right, so let's move on to the next story, which is, let's see it here. Oh, yeah, right. That sounds crazy. So vendors don't have answers to the ROI for AI question. And I'm just like, yeah, no kidding. Like, isn't that one of the most obvious things you've probably heard today is that vendors don't have... Nobody can explain where the return on investment is for AI, least of all vendors who are building it into their products, apparently. At least Salesforce. This came out of Salesforce, Gartner's conference. Sorry, the Gartner conference. They had Mark Benioff on stage asking about, like, hey, Salesforce is using AI in your product. How's that working out for you, basically? Where's the ROI? And he specifically says, if you think anyone has a complete answer or there's any vendor that's on this stage and says, I know what to do here in this world of new agentic enterprise, they've made a mistake, is what he said. So basically he's saying, yeah, we're all figuring out how to build AI into our product and like what use it has and how it will drive ROI. So this is really funny. Obviously the link to the article's in the show notes here, but the whole article goes over what everybody that's been working with AI knows, whether or not they want to admit it at the end of the day, which is, there's so much of this agentic AI and digital coworkers and like this idea of like AI being able to just go and do all of these tasks, but money wise, like where are people seeing the return on investment? Where is a company that spent $1 million building out an agentic AI enterprise function seeing the return? I'm not seeing those stories, right? I'm not seeing anybody saying, hey, we built this and we're seeing huge gains in productivity and money and all of this. I don't know, Steve, have any of your customers doing this, and have they seen anything?
So, I have customers that are experimenting with AI. I have some that are using SaaS tooling like Amazon Bedrock or Azure AI, and some that they're building their own on-prem, which.
Oh, that's surprising, actually.
Yeah, I have a couple that are actually building on-prem, and to me, the most obvious analog would be like the .com boom. Right. Yeah. I'm an oldie. I lived through the .com boom, and I just remember when it was like everybody's like freaking out about e-commerce. Yeah. It sounds so quaint now, doesn't it? but the hype, like the level of hype and just like venture capital money, just people just spending insane amounts of money when the use cases didn't make sense, right? And I feel like this is probably going to follow a similar trajectory where there's useful things that are going to happen. Like AI is great for like non-deterministic use cases. When you try to get a deterministic output, then there's misalignment, and then you get yourself in trouble very quickly. But eventually, the tide will go out, and a lot of companies are going to get wrecked. But in the wake of that, there will be some cool stuff. But yeah, right now we just have to live through this crazy hype.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote a Substack, I don't know, last week or something, and I was going over this exact thing, which is like, anything that people are building with AI right now they're building it in a heavily subsidized environment, right? So 100%. Like they are building an agent that does XYZ, logs into routers and switches, or builds an application or whatever this is. Copilot, perfect example, right? Every checkbox AI feature that vendors are putting in is being implemented in a very subsidized environment where the tokens are cheap as hell, right? Yeah. So what happens when the VC money or whatever is fueling this, what's propping up the U.S. economy, God like when this VC money eventually has not seen the return and has to dry up at some point, and then the tokens are going to have to cost what they're worth. Basically what more than they cost to create, essentially, right? Resource wise. How are these fun little chatbot features that are in your product and whatnot that they're gonna cost money, right? All these things are gonna cost. Even you're gonna have things like local models, of course. A good vendor is gonna build a local model. They're gonna have their own local models. I'm not necessarily talking about that, but anything LLM based, anything that's based on using the vendors that isn't, hey, I built my own model, I downloaded my own model, I fine-tuned my own model, I went through the exercise and the money, and there are companies doing that, by the way. We work for one. Those companies much more insulated against this, right? But there's so many people out there doing so many science projects and proof of concepts, and hey, isn't this cool? I can get my AI agent to send an email for me or something. Things that you're just not going to want to spend tokens on once those tokens cost money. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I think I'm with you, Steve. I think there's going to be a bust, and I think after that we can start having real conversations about the true usefulness that we can get out of essentially.
I mean, there's actually things that, despite the hype, kind of is always is a turn off especially when you've lived through a bunch of these hype cycles.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there are a few things I get excited about, right? Like chatbots never really struck me as being
interesting.
They're not novel, right?
That's true.
But once you take an LLM and you bolt memory and tools onto it, and now it can do something interesting right now. And then once you are able to take those and you start wiring them together into these kind of interesting architectures, it's cool. But like you said, the problem is the resource consumption, the amount of resources it takes to build something like that. Like right now, we are definitely in a subsidized environment, and I'm sure probably the vast majority of people listening to this would agree. But if you don't, just for funsies, go and try and download some models on your laptop and run them. You'll quickly find out, right? Even if you have like a newer machine with like a bunch of cores and a ton of memory and a GPU, you're like, dang, I think I need to go find one with maybe a smaller number of parameters because this sucks. This is slow, right?
Yeah, we're in that part of technology where bigger is better, like the ENIAC type of thing where we're, just to get simple calculations, we're filling rooms full of computers type of thing. Eventually, again, and I hope this happens after the collapse, we'll get to, we need to make these things efficient so we can charge what these tokens are worth and actually get profit out of them. That's what I would hope and expect is right. Because right now, it costs nothing. It truly costs a lot, right? But it costs nothing to the people that are paying essentially to do this, so they can be wasteful.
I just thought it's almost as if you could go back in the 1970s and convinced IBM to like put some like take their ginormous mainframes and just like let people use them for free. It's like the same idea.
Yeah, it is the same idea. It is.
Use our free mainframe.
Right.
That like takes like a freaking power plant to run.
Yep. Yep. And look at all the cool stuff you can do with it. Yeah, but like who's paying for all this, right? So that's to me that's the thing. That is the thing, the question that nobody can answer, and I think nobody will be able to answer it until the crash happens, because everybody's so busy barreling towards whatever the what would you call it? The singularity of AI here is. They don't have time to do things like optimize. Apparently, I mean, I guess the Chinese do if you believe those DeepSeek numbers or whatever. But yeah, everybody's too busy trying to do the next thing, like the next model, the next thing, GPT-4, 4.5, 5, and so on and so forth. Nobody's working on the optimization, or if they are, they're not being vocal about it, or it's like third row back, not up front. So. Like I said, once people have to pay what these tokens are worth, and there's companies that actually have to like try to make profit off of it, I think that's when you're going to see the real time spent on making this thing a lot more efficient. And God knows it has to be. How many data centers are going up in the U.S. on the bed of AI? Like 19, some ridiculous amount of data centers. They're reinvesting in nuclear power. Which is good, by the way. Nuclear power is fine. I'm just saying, like, there's so much. I don't think people understand the money the money and the resources.
I think you actually just kind of touched on something. I started thinking about this as you were talking. You're seeing like I live in Appalachian Mountains, right? So I live in Western North Carolina, but the Appalachian Mountains mountain range goes all the way up into West Virginia. It's goes from like Georgia up through West Virginia, and so the Appalachian Mountains pass through some of the poorest areas of the country, and some of these counties. Folks are operators are going in there like they're throwing up these data centers because the cost of land is cheap, and they're getting subsidized power from the local power company. Yeah, there's no thought to the people that live there and how those data centers might affect their quality of life. And for me, the closest analog, and it's not there, but it's minor, but it's just interesting because it's a way that it touches my life, and that is when I go hiking. Like if I'm like up on the Parkway, or I go up on Grandfather Mountain, or I go hiking the Limbo Gorge, and I'm looking out, and I look towards Lenore, particularly in the morning on a clear day, probably one of the most prominent features from this part of the Appalachians is the Google data center in Lenore, right? Because it puts off these steam stacks. You can see I thought it was a furniture factory for the longest time. I looked it up on, ironically, Google Maps. I'm like, oh, that's the Google data center, right? So data centers are becoming, it's more than just like this abstract, like this building, industrial building that is unseen. It actually as more and more of these get built and they consume more and more power, drives your electricity bill up, and your odds that you're going to be living closer to one go up, right? And so there's some potentially environmental concerns. So it's kind of, I think we might start to see some more people, once it's less an abstraction, it becomes like a real part of people's lives and they're seeing it all around them. They might become
they'll understand. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I guess we'll leave it there. This is as good a place as any to stop. Did you have fun with this, Steve? I hope you had fun with this. I love doing this. I did. I'm glad we got to like nerd out on a bunch of security stuff and you just kind of went with it. And it was kind of fun, like scratching our heads and kind of struggling to understand all the circular dependencies in the AWS outage, and especially the way I love the way in the report. You got to read this report just to watch they're trying to explain and be transparent, but they're also kind of trying to say, well, if you did things correctly, but not really, because this actually did kind of affect other regions a little bit, maybe. It's an interesting read if you can get through it. Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. Well, as usual, I'm Tim. This is Steve, and we'll see you on the next God damn it, I was about to say Fortnightly News again. Monthly news update. All right, take care, everybody.